In the heart of a cold American city, under gray skies and heavy footsteps, a boy moved like a shadow between the cracks of the world. His name was Tafari, a black orphan from Africa, no more than 10 years old. He wore the same worn shoes each day, the solace barely holding. His coat was too thin for winter, his fingers always cold, and his stomach often empty. But Tafari never begged. He believed that dignity had no price. Each morning, he left the old shelter run by strangers and wandered the streets before sunrise, collecting cans, sweeping storefronts, or offering to carry groceries for a coin or two. The people passed him by, some looking through him, others not looking at all. To them, he was invisible. But Tafari kept moving. His heart was still alive, still gentle, even in a world that had never been kind to him, on a day like any other. Snow had started to fall again. The roads were slippery, the wind harsh. Across the street near the corner cafe, Tafari noticed something others didn't. An old man, hunched and trembling, stood at the curb. He had no umbrella. His coat was long, dark, and elegant, but his body inside it seemed to be fighting gravity. No one stopped, no one slowed down. Cars rushed by, drivers annoyed by the traffic light and the weather. Tafari paused. Then, without hesitation, he crossed over. He reached the old man with small, careful steps. Without words, without needing to be asked, Tafari offered his hand. The old man looked at him, and something passed between them. Not speech, not even expression. Just a moment, frozen in the snow. Tafari led him gently across the icy road. They moved slowly, step by step, the boy's hand steady, the old man's steps unsure. The cars waited impatiently. Some horns blared. But Tafari did not hurry. He waited for the old man to feel safe. When they reached the sidewalk, the old man paused, then placed something into Tafari's coat pocket. He said nothing, and walked away with slow steps, disappearing behind a line of trees. Tafari stood still for a long moment, snow gathering on his shoulders. He pulled out the object from his pocket. It was an envelope. Thick, clean, white. It had no name on it, only a seal made of red wax. Tafari didn't open it right away. He looked around. The old man was gone. He ran to the alley where he often hid when it got too cold. With trembling fingers he broke the seal. Inside was not money, not a map, not a ticket, but a letter written in the cleanest handwriting Tafari had ever seen. He read each word slowly, trying to make sense of them. What he saw inside that letter was not just shocking, it was a door. A door to a future no one could have imagined for a child like Tafari. A door that would challenge everything he knew. And a gift not everyone would want him to receive. But Tafari had no idea that by holding that letter, he had just changed the course of his life forever. He had no idea that he was being watched. Tafari sat alone in the shadows of the alley, holding the letter with both hands, as if it might fly away if he let go. His eyes moved slowly across the words, trying to understand what they meant. The writing was clean, old-fashioned, and full of things he had never seen before. But even with his limited reading, he could feel something powerful hidden inside each sentence. The letter spoke of an inheritance, a large amount of money, a property, a responsibility, and a name that no longer belonged to the world, Mr. Whitmore. The man Tafari had helped was not just an old man. He was once the richest real estate tycoon in the region, a man thought to be long retired and forgotten. The letter declared that Mr. Whitmore had chosen Tafari to receive everything he owned. Not because of blood, not because of paperwork, but because of character. Because in a world that passed by the weak, Tafari had stopped, but with that gift came danger. The letter warned of people who would try to take it all. It spoke of men in suits with cold eyes, of lawyers who would deny it, of family members who would call it madness. Tafari was given instructions to go to a specific building. A name he had never heard before, the Whitmore Foundation headquarters. And a date. 1 week from today. He folded the letter and hid it deep inside his shirt. For the next few days, Tafari tried to go back to normal. He cleaned windows. He gathered cans. He nodded at strangers, kept his head down. But nothing was the same. The frail world around him looked different. The people in coats and ties now made him nervous. The quiet black cars that used to pass him now felt like threats. He didn't know who knew. He didn't know who might be watching, and they were watching, from across the street. From dark windows, from behind newspapers and diners. Men with still faces and listening devices. Men who had been trained to spot threats, to protect secrets, to silence problems before they grew too big. To them, Tafari was a problem, because they knew something he didn't, that Mr. Whitmore had disappeared years ago, that no one had seen him since, and that letter in Tafari's hand was not supposed to exist. One night, as Tafari returned to the shelter late, he found his little corner destroyed. His blankets gone, his things scattered. And on the wall, written in chalk, a warning: stay away from the tower. He didn't know what tower. He didn't know who left the message. But he felt it. The walls around his life were starting to move. Something was closing in. And far above the city, in a tall glass building with lights that never slept, a man in a leather chair stared at a photo on his desk. Thought it was a grainy image, pulled from a street camera, a black boy, no older than 10, helping an old man cross the road. His fist clenched. And without speaking, he pressed a red button on his phone. Somewhere below, in the darkness of the garage, a car engine came alive, and its driver had one mission: find the boy, before the boy found the truth. The morning sky was gray, filled with clouds that moved like heavy smoke. Tafari stood across the street from a building that stretched high into the clouds, the Whitmore Tower. It was made of glass and steel, cold and perfect, with guards at the entrance who never blinked. The name Whitmore Foundation shimmered in silver letters above the tall glass doors. Tafari's feet were wet. His coat smelled of damp cement. He had not slept. He had not eaten. But in his chest something stronger than fear was burning. The letter in his pocket had led him here. Every step he took since that snowy day had pointed to this place. He waited until the guards turned their eyes for a moment, then slipped through the side gate, moving quickly past loading trucks and into the service hallway. He had learned how to move without being seen. The shelter taught him that. The streets had sharpened it. Inside the building, everything was polished and cold. The air smelled like money. Every step echoed. Tafari moved like a whisper down the halls, following the numbers on the walls. The letter had told him where to go. Floor 47. Office 4701. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew he had to get there. He found the stairwell and began to climb. 1 step, then 10, then 100. His legs ached. His breath grew short, but he kept going. Past the dusty levels where workers stored cleaning carts, past locked doors and blinking red lights, until finally, his shaking hand touched the door marked 4701. It was unlocked. Inside, the room was filled with dust and quiet. The lights were dim, the air untouched for years. On the walls were photographs of Mr. Whitmore, awards and paintings of buildings he had once owned. In the center of the room stood a desk, and on it, a small metal box. Tafar. I walked forward and opened the box. Inside were papers, photographs, a small black book with golden edges, and another envelope. His name was on this one. He opened it. The letter inside spoke of secrets, of betrayal, of a foundation built not on kindness, but on control. Mr. Whitmore had wanted to change that. He had written everything down, names, places, proof, and he had chosen Tafari not just as an heir, but as a messenger. Suddenly behind him, a sound. Footsteps. Tafar. I turned, but it was too late. Two men in black suits entered the room. Their eyes were cold, their movements sharp. One of them reached for the box. The other grabbed Tafari by the arm, but Tafari didn't let go. He clutched the envelope, held it close to his chest. He tried to pull free, but they were too strong. One of the men reached into his coat. And in that instant, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, and a shadow leapt through the broken pane. A figure in black hit the floor and knocked one of the men to the ground. The second man raised his hand, but the intruder moved too fast. A blow to the ribs, a twist of the wrist. Silence. The figure turned to Tafari, a woman, her face hidden behind a mask. She reached out her hand. Tafari hesitated, but took it. Without a word, they ran together toward the stairwell. Alarms began to scream. Lights flashed red. Somewhere below, more footsteps thundered up the stairs. Woman pulled Tafari into a maintenance shaft, and they began to descend in darkness. Floor by floor, breath by breath, the tower had shown its teeth, and Tafari had just become part of a war he never knew existed. The shaft was narrow and cold, filled with the scent of rust and old wires. Tafari and the masked woman descended in silence, their feet hitting each ladder rung with quiet urgency. Above them, the tower roared with alarms, boots pounding steel, doors slamming shut. Somewhere in those floors, men were searching, hunting. But Tafari was no longer alone. They reached the bottom after what felt like hours. The woman pushed open a panel, revealing a dark hallway beneath the building. She led him through it without a word. The walls were concrete. The air was wet. This was no place anyone would come willingly. Yet the woman moved with purpose, her hand never leaving the hilt of something hidden beneath her coat. After winding through tunnels and old utility paths, they reached an old elevator shaft, long out of use. With one push of a lever, a hidden door slid open. Inside was a room, small, dim, and full of maps, papers, and glowing screens. A hidden base beneath the city. The woman removed her mask. She was young, her skin deep brown, her eyes sharp like broken glass, her hair tied tightly behind her. She looked like someone who had seen too much, trusted too little, and lived on the edge for too long. On the wall behind her was a large, faded photo. Mr. Whitmore. Next to him, a little girl. Tafari stepped closer. It was her. She introduced herself with a single name on a worn ID tag stuck to the monitor. Zara. Zara was Mr. Whitmore's granddaughter, but not the kind the world knew about. She had been hidden, erased from records, pushed out by the same people who had taken over the Whitmore empire after her grandfather's disappearance. While others chased money, she chased truth. And now, she needed Tafari. The envelope he carried, she said, held the last pieces of a puzzle her grandfather had spent years trying to protect. Not just wealth, but evidence. Documents that could expose the real power behind the Whitmore Foundation. A silent network of powerful figures who used the name as a mask for manipulation, surveillance, and control. Zara believed her grandfather had seen through it all. And in his final days, before going into hiding, he had chosen to pass it on to someone pure. Not connected, not corrupted, someone like Tafari. But time was running out. Zara showed him a map. 7 locations marked in red, each one tied to hidden vaults of information buried beneath the empire. Each one holding a piece of the legacy Mr. Whitmore had tried to protect. If even one piece fell into the wrong hands, it could vanish forever. But there was more. The man who now led the Whitmore Foundation, Marius Flint, had already started moving. He had sent agents to each vault. He was erasing the past, one file at a time. And he had placed a price on Tafari's head. Zara opened a drawer. Inside was a small silver key. She handed it to Tafari. It belonged to the first vault, hidden beneath an abandoned train station at the edge of the city. He had a choice: stay here and disappear into the darkness, or rise and carry a legacy never meant to be his. Tafari closed his hand around the key. The journey was no longer just about survival. It had become a mission. But as they prepared to leave, a red light blinked on the screen. Surveillance breach. Someone had found them, and they were not coming to negotiate. The sky was still dark when Tafari and Zara surfaced from the underground. The streets above had not yet woken, but danger had. They moved quickly, hidden by shadows, their breath visible in the cold air. Each alley they passed, each window above them, could hold eyes trained to watch. The Whitmore Foundation had its reach deep in the city. Zara led the way to the edge of the old district, where broken warehouses leaned against each other like drunk men, and the ground was cracked with weeds. There, beneath a shattered sign that once read Harper Station, was their destination, the abandoned train yard. Once, it had been full of life, crowds, noise, movement, but now it was hollow, echoing with ghosts. Steel rails stretched into the fog, rusted and forgotten. The entrance to the vault was beneath Platform 7, hidden behind a wall of crates, where the keyhole sat inside an old control panel no one touched anymore. Tafari's hands trembled as he slid the silver key into the slot. A low hum vibrated beneath their feet. The ground shifted slightly. Then, with a hiss, a hidden door slid open beneath the platform, revealing a stairway swallowed in darkness. They descended without speaking. The air was thick, the walls concrete and silent. Every step echoed like a threat. At the bottom, they reached a massive steel door. Zara pressed her palm against a scanner. The machine clicked, then slowly opened with a deep groan. Inside was not just a vault. It was a memory chamber. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. Metal drawers held names, deeds, blueprints, bank ledgers, and photos. On a central table lay a large black binder labeled Operation Ascendant. Zara opened it. The files inside told a story of manipulation, of secret land buys, evictions, rigged auctions, and silent takeovers. The Whitmore Foundation had not only built towers and homes, it had removed entire communities to do so, especially poor neighborhoods, especially children like Tafari. These were the people erased from records. Their homes demolished, their lives forgotten. Tafari stared at the pages, his chest heavy. Among the documents was one file marked Elysium Project, a new initiative, still in planning. It involved the removal of 5 neighborhoods in the coming months. One of them was the location of Tafari's shelter. Suddenly, behind them, footsteps. Quick, heavy, armed. Zara grabbed as many documents as she could. She handed Tafari a flash drive. It held copies of everything. She whispered one word: run. The steel door behind them blasted open. A group of men in tactical gear poured in, red lights blinking on their weapons. Tafari turned and bolted through a narrow side tunnel. The echo of boots chased him. Bullets cracked through the air. Sparks flew as metal met concrete. He climbed a ladder, pushed open a hatch, and emerged into an old maintenance shed above ground. His breath was wild, his heart like thunder. He looked back. No sign of Zara. Only silence. He didn't know if she had escaped. He didn't know if she was alive. All he knew was the flash drive in his pocket was now the only remaining copy of the truth. And as he stepped out into the frozen dawn, a black van turned the corner ahead of him. Its engine low, its windows tinted, and it was coming straight toward him. The van roared forward, tires screaming across wet pavement. Tafari's legs moved before his mind could catch up. He turned and ran, his feet pounding the cracked sidewalk, arms pumping, chest heaving. The cold burned his lungs. Behind him, the van closed in, headlights blazing through the fog, swallowing the distance. He darted between rusted fences, cut through narrow alleys, and leapt over puddles turned to ice. Garbage cans clattered in his wake. The streets of the hollow city twisted like a maze, but this was Tafari's world. These broken paths had been his home long before this war had begun. The van couldn't follow through the narrow alleys. Doors slammed open. Men jumped out, shouting into earpieces, splitting up to corner him. Tafari slipped through a bent chain link fence and found himself in the ruins of an old parking structure. The air inside was thick with dust and old oil. He climbed the stairwell 3 steps at a time, heart pounding louder than the boots below. At the top, he reached the roof. Wind screamed. Below him, the city opened wide, a jungle of steel and smoke. He looked down, his fingers gripping the edge. No way forward. No way back. But across the alley, another rooftop, close but not close enough. The men burst through the door behind him. Red lasers danced through the air. Tafari ran. He didn't think. He jumped. Time stretched. For a moment. There was nothing. No noise, no fear. Just air. Then the hard crash of a rooftop beneath him. His shoulder hit first. Pain shot through his arm. But he rolled, scrambled to his feet, and kept moving. Shouts echoed behind him, more footsteps. More danger. He escaped into a ventilation shaft on the far side of the roof and dropped into a laundry room of an abandoned building. Dust coated the air, rats scattered. He crawled through the old halls, past broken doors and silent walls. Finally, he reached a hole in the basement floor, a secret path Zara had once shown him, leading into the underground waterway system. There, beneath the city's bones, Tafari stopped. He opened his coat and pulled out the flash drive. It still worked. He lit a small candle from the old supplies left behind. The flicker danced on the walls, revealing drawings, Zara's markings, notes from her mission. She had been here before, hiding, planning, fighting. The silence reminded Tafari of the worst possibility. She might be gone. He couldn't think about that now. He searched through the old boxes in the hideout, found a radio transmitter, one of the emergency ones Zara had stored. With shaking fingers, he turned the dial to the frequency she once told him, a private channel only meant for last chances. He sent a signal, short, urgent, silent. He didn't know if anyone would hear it, but if no one did, he would have to finish this alone. Above him, the sound of sewer grates being moved. The boots were back, and this time, they were not coming to scare him, they were coming to end it. The candle flickered, casting shadows across the damp walls. Tafari pressed his back against the stone. The flash drive clutched tightly in his fist. Water dripped from pipes above. The sound of metal scraping echoed through the tunnels. They were getting closer. He closed his eyes just for a moment. The silence pressed against his ears. In that stillness, he could almost hear Zara's voice again, not with words, but with presence, her determination, her fire. It had not vanished. It had simply passed on. To him, he rose. His small frame moved through the dark tunnels like a whisper. He took narrow paths, climbed rusted ladders, ducked beneath fallen beams. His body ached, his shoulder burned. But his mind was clear. Every step had purpose. Every breath was defiance. Above ground, dawn had begun to break. The sky turned from black to deep purple. Tafari emerged behind the library, a grand building near the city square. Years ago, it had been a place of learning. Now it had been bought by the Whitmore Foundation and turned into a data center, a place meant to control what the public saw and never saw. But Zara had shown him its secret. Beneath the library's archive was an old transmitter system, one of the last untouched communication lines in the city. Not part of the internet. Not tracked. Meant for emergencies during wartime. And today was a war. Tafar. I slipped in through the back entrance, past security systems whose blind spots Zara had memorized. His small fingers typed codes, flipped hidden switches. The room buzzed to life. The old machine glowed softly, like it too had been waiting for him. He inserted the flash drive. The data loaded slowly. Pages upon pages of truth, names, locations, evidence, all of it prepared for broadcast to every connected terminal in the city. Government offices, public screens, newsrooms, shelters. A release of truth too large to be erased. He placed his hand over the final button. Above him, footsteps. They had found him. He pressed send. A surge of light filled the room. Screens everywhere came alive. Streets lit up with names the public was never meant to hear. Children in shelters watched their stories appear. Families saw the hidden theft of their homes. The city gasped. And just as the final file uploaded, the door exploded. Tafar. I turned. The men in black stormed in. But they were too late. The truth had escaped. They lunged forward. One grabbed Tafari. Another pulled the drive from the console. But the data was already gone, scattered across the city like seeds in the wind. The control they had held for years was cracking. And then a sound. The heavy boom of a truck crashing through the library gates. The masked figure at the wheel. Zara. Bloodied, bruised, but alive. She stormed in through the smoke and chaos, bringing others behind her. Workers, former allies of Mr. Whitmore, the silenced ones. They had seen the broadcast. They had returned. A fight broke out. The Tower of Lies was falling. In the middle of it all, Tafari stood still, not as a victim, not even as a child, but as the boy who had carried the fire. He had not asked for this burden. He had not been trained. He had only chosen to care. And in that choice, he had changed everything. The men were driven back. The rooms were cleared. The final lock broken. Zara stood beside him. She looked down at him, and for the first time, there was peace in her eyes. The city outside was waking. And far above, where the tallest buildings pierced the sky, the Whitmore name began to dim, and a new name would rise. One built not on power. But on truth, and the quiet courage of a poor orphan who once helped an old man cross the street.